Before the 2023 season, I made some predictions for the season ahead. Now, I did this before even pre-season testing. Let me tell you, I won't make that same mistake again. I thought I'd just go back and have a look which ones I got wrong, which was a lot, and which ones I got right. Let's get into it. Starting with the biggest improvement. So for this, I thought it was going to be Aston Martin. And to be fair, if we judged halfway through the season, you'd have probably said I was bang on. But Aston Martin started to fall off in their development and their improvements seemed less and less. And as the season went on, apart from that outlier podium in Brazil, they weren't really doing that well and they'd fallen off. I think ultimately, though, it ended up being McLaren. They were not only the most improved from the year before, but they were the most improved throughout the season. In the first race in Bahrain, they were pretty much the last team. They were one of the slowest cars. It looked really bad. They kept saying, hold on, this isn't our true car. Our true car is coming. And they went from the back of the grid to arguably Red Bull's biggest competitor and the strongest looking car really for the majority of the races. And for that, you have to give them a lot of credit. On the flip side of that, the biggest team decline, well, this is how wrong I got it. I foolishly went for McLaren, and I even said at the time I might regret it. Just like I was saying there, if we judged it halfway through the season, I'd have been bang on. So if these were my half-season predictions, I'd be looking pretty clever. But they're not half-season predictions, and McLaren, well, they'd struggled the year before. They were doing fine, but I just felt that other teams would do better, and they would fall by the wayside. And at the beginning of the season, that did seem to be the case, but obviously they got their act together, and so I was wrong. Moving on to the biggest flop. Now, I regret doing this category, actually, and it's a bit harsh, so I won't be doing it for 2024's predictions, but I do have to cover my answers regardless. I did say Logan Sargent was going to be the biggest flop and most accident prone. And while I don't think he was a flop by any stretch of the imaginations, he did struggle. Alex Albon really shined in that role alongside him. If Sargent get a few more results this year, then he's going to be doing pretty well. Nick de Vries, though, has to be the biggest flop. Let's not call it a flop. Let's call it a disappointment. Although no one likes to be called a disappointment. Regardless, he lost his seat halfway through the season, whether you think it was fair, not fair. His performances weren't great. So ultimately, Formula One's a results business. It's sad, but it's true. Moving on to the worst race. Now, for the worst race, I said Spain, because I don't think the track changes were going to make it any more interesting, and I just don't really like Spain as a track. As it happens, I think Baku might have been one of my worst races that I personally enjoyed, despite it being one of the races that Max didn't win. I remember the sprint was pretty interesting, although George Russell did try and spear Max, but ultimately, I just felt that the race itself was pretty dull. The flip side of that is the best race. Now, I admit I was being optimistic. I said Abu Dhabi hoping the championship was going to go to the last race. As it turned out, that was more than a little bit optimistic. It was dreamland, I admit that. It's hard to choose one race because I think there was actually a couple of standout races. I think Zandvoort is right up there for me, though. Sure, the changeable conditions, especially at the beginning of the race, made it a lot more exciting with the rain coming down, but I did think it was a really good race. And I hate to say this, but I actually kind of enjoyed Vegas as well. I really didn't think I was going to enjoy Vegas. I thought it was going to be a disaster. And then FP1 happened, and well, we all know, I thought at least, this is the beginning of a terrible, terrible weekend. But the race itself was actually pretty entertaining. Zandvoort, though, I think because of the changeable conditions and the track, I think that pips it for me as the race of the season. Moving on to the world champion. Now, after this latest season, surely you'd feel like a fool if you got the world champion wrong, because let's face it, Verstappen dominated 2023 and took the world title with ease. But I went for Charles Leclerc. Why did I do that? I just felt such a sense of improvement from Ferrari from 2022 and anticipated they would take a step forward. I was wrong. Oh, so very wrong. I guess Charles Leclerc just because I thought that Ferrari would take that step up. But we couldn't have known that Max and Red Bull were just going to absolutely dominate the opposition. Well, we probably should have known. Moving on to the Constructors' Champion. Based on what happened in 2021, I was expecting for a close fight in the Constructors' Championship, or at least hoping for it. Maybe a three-way fight between Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. I thought Mercedes would pit the Constructors' Championship, but lose out on the Drivers' Championship, a bit like happened in 2021. But of course, Red Bull reigned supreme. It wasn't just the fact that the car was good, because ultimately Max was getting all the points. He was dominating the races and he was building up such a buffer for Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, as well as the Drivers' Championship as well. Mercedes would finish second, but if we're being entirely honest, if McLaren would have had the car that they had at the end of the season, at the beginning of the season, Mercedes would have been a distant third. I also did predict which teammate would come out on top, and I did get 8 out of 10 right. The two wrong ones being Sauber and AlphaTauri. Can you actually believe I thought Nick De Vries would outshine and outperform Yuki Tsunoda? Listen, I apologise, Yuki. I really apologise. I underestimated you. It won't happen again. I'm not sure if I was being just a little bit too optimistic with my predictions from last year. Just hoping for a close season, maybe willing it on. I think I'm going to do things a little bit differently with my predictions for this coming season, though. First of all, I'm going to do my predictions after pre-season testing. That is what I didn't do last year. And second of all, I think I'm going to lead with my head rather than my heart a little bit. I was kind of putting ideas out there in the hope that we'd have more competition, but reality is I need to think with my head rather than my heart. So stay tuned. My 2024 predictions will be coming up shortly. Hope you enjoyed this little recap, and I'll see you next time.